8. It was evening now. All afternoon, following Major Sharp's detainment of her under close guard, she had heard the riflemen going about their duties. All afternoon, instead of, by rights, being there, doing her share, she had watched Isplee's shadow changed as the sun moved until now the shadow was no more. They thought her a traitor, she knew. Was it because she was a woman, then? Did they think she had help in maintaining a cover? Or that the cover was an intrigue to infiltrate the army? All ideas sounded preposterous to her. Yet, if the major believed her, others might. She fought out the image of the captain. For the captain to believe it would be too much to bear. But, of course, coupled with the open knowledge that she was born of John Haycock, and that the women were still missing, Tom could understand the feeling of anger and betrayal. Tom closed her eyes. The women would be back, she had told Harris where they had gone. Major Sharp could find out about Ducos. It was a terrible accusation, to be called out for cowardice, even by the enemy. And to have a murder attached to his name? Tom closed her eyes and dreamed of morning. 88,888,888. Hands. Hands grabbing. Hands pulling and tearing and lifting. Around her hands, and faces, too. And shouts, all at once, that Tom could not discern. She was no longer in the major's tent, there was no longer converse between her and the provost marshal. Instead the hands and voices and faces belonged to those she was once fellowed with. It was dark, Tom struggled, but she was held fast, into the arms of Paget and Taylor, who, with a dozen or so 60 THS, were dragging her through the clearing and into the copse of trees. When they had got where they were going, they dropped her to the floor. Tom got up, but was pulled by the hair to the ground. She leapt forward, but couldn't effect much of an attack. "What?" she cried. "Why?" She felt her hair released and her head slumped. With effort, Tom got to her knees, and then to her feet. She looked around in the twilight at the faces of those who had abducted her, who had brought her out here. For what? But no one answered. Instead, the men of the 60th turned their rifles upright and beat a rhythm on the dry earth. Then a man stepped forward, face crumpled, and eyes weary. Anders Schmidt pushed his way forward. He did not shout at her, which might have been better. Instead his words were quiet, anguish-filled. Bitter. Tom tried to move but a hand gripped her hair again. Anders moved so far forward that he became out of focus. Tom blinked, and swallowed. "So," Schmidt began, curling his words into her face. "John Haycock's brat." "Do you know what your father did?" asked another voice, behind Schmidt. Nykteln, a broad-shouldered blonde-haired man replaced Schmidt, glaring at her. "Your father destroyed regiments in the colonies. Leroy, God rest his soul, of South Carolina, lost 13 squadrons. He cut off food supplies to the companies, to us, to the 62nd. To the 75th he dammed the river at Georgetown, to hasten their thirst, and when they gave out, one by one, arms up, white cloths on fists. Do you know what happened next?" he snarled. Tom shook her head, her heart beating fast now, in her neck, on her ears. "He shot them, like rats. Those EMST let the Indians scalp, cut their guts out." Nykteln grabbed at Tom's abdomen, and their private parts off. He looked down, and sneered. "And the 65th Company trapped 'em in Tby sand, and the Atlantic drowned 'em as Tby tide came in." He grinned, as Tby horror of such an occurrence played as fear across Tom's face. "When the 40th, who were pleased at their victory at Williamsburg, the Indians got them with poison arrows. I seed it, me and Schmidt, and Bagot, and Taylor, those men he'd name-checked grunted in agreement. They was there, turning in pain, took hours to die." He pushed her back, so she landed awkwardly onto the ground. The men stood in a circle around her. This time, When she tried to get up, she was kicked down. In kidneys, in ribs. We doesn't care that you are a girl, you let that happen to our women. You did that to us. Nicktuln drew back his leg and kicked her in the stomach. Hadn't the women come back, she wanted to ask. Hadn't Matt Harris found them? But her lungs were breathless and she could hardly get in enough air to stand, let alone talk. But, finally, she did, and she turned on Nicktuln, the biggest of her aggressors. What is it to be then? Tom demanded as they tore at her clothes. Rape? Be prepared, she told herself. There would be a chink, a mistake. They were drunk. And she would take the chance when it came. No one would touch you, mocked Taylor, laughing. You heard what the major said, came a voice on the outside of the group. A hanging offense. I say, hoist a rope, boys. And, as horror began to fill Tom's mind, arms gripped her as a cheer of assent went up. But there was nothing to be done. Already Tom could feel the tightening in her throat even though the rope was slack. Even though she had done nothing wrong. She closed her eyes, all fight gone from her. She felt tears, but she would not cry. A voice near her ear declared, to the traitor's brat. May we have justice? No. Came a voice, clear and strong. No. Unhand that person. Captain Fredrickson stepped into the shaft of moonlight. The men stopped. But they did not release her from the rope. You of all people should agree with what we are doing, sir. Think about what John Haycock did to you. We was there, sir. Don't you recall the siege at Jamestown? I try not to, replied Fredrickson, reaching up with his hand to Schmidt's face as the soldier spoke. The man shrank back, but Nicktuln stepped defiantly beside him. Tom watched as the captain spoke to his company. Though I can recall it, every moment. But what is she, to that? What about your fathers, eh? Drinks? Women beaters? Scoundrels? Debtors? Thieves? Do their crimes condemn your necks? We would say so after what the major said tonight. She did not do this, Fredrickson declared. The women. Your women have returned. Harris found them safe where she said they would be. They say the same. He looking up for a moment to Tom, his eye shimmering next to his dim, solid, false one, then jerked his head back to his men. Without her bravery, her wit, he found himself saying, without her having the sense to take a rifle and use it, to tell the women where to go for safety, then they, and your children, would have been murdered like Private Schmidt's wife and son. She sent the women off to a place of safety. She went after all 8 of those men, then came after us to warn us. There was silence, as the men digested their commander's words. Tom closed her eyes. The captain had vouched for her. She was not to be hanged. Like hell. A voice rang clear through the men. Fredrickson turned to the voice, his eyes searching for the owner. The French officer confirms it. So you will let her down, allow her to. But the captain was not allowed to finish. There was a surge towards Tom, who was standing on the branch of the tree, her legs held by 2 of the 60th. Lightning quick, the captain leveled his rifle, and fired into the air. Some of the men scattered. Tom felt a hand on her back, recognized the growl of the man who pushed her as the rope tightened around her neck. But then almost immediately, it slackened again. Tom fell heavily to the floor. William Fredrickson had shot down the rope and was striding over to Tom. She closed her eyes, then jerked them open as she felt hands, swift, deft hands loosening the noose and gathering her into his arms. All is well, Liebeln, she heard Fredrickson say quietly, by her ear. Get back to camp, all of you, demanded the captain, shortly. You will, all of you, be lucky if you don't find yourselves up on a charge of murder. That's right, came another voice. Tom craned his neck into the gloom. But the voice could only be one man's. Take her back to my tent. Harris, and for God's sake, you stay with her, this time, for pity's sake. And get Ramona Harper." He watched as Fredrickson let Tom down to her feet, almost reluctantly, Harris taking her arm around his shoulders and walking with her, slowly and carefully. Then, to the stragglers of the 60th, he bellowed, "Get back to camp, or there will be bloody murder tonight." 88,888,888. It is quite a thing, Richard. Major Munro pushed the document he had been instructed to deliver to Sharp across the makeshift table of the 95th's camp officers' table. GE watched as the Major read the words, eyes open in disbelief. "The Articles of Peace, no more war," Munro continued, as if declaring that was enough of an explanation, nodding at his valet, who poured more whiskey for the Major, and he proffered the bottle to Sharp, who nodded. "Bonaparte was captured yesterday," continued Munro. "The war officially ended at midday yesterday. Sorry we were unable to find you. I was carrying out my orders last night. Action that could now be deemed as attacks on allies." "The French are our allies?" Lamentably, nodded the Major, taking a sip of the amber spirit. "Ah, nothing better than Jura." He leaned forwards, towards Richard. "There is talk, well, more than talk, of an attack, gold being captured." "Aye?" "Aye. The gold was being kept at the fort that the South Essex took, that you took. It is rumoured." Another sip. "It is being rumoured," he emphasized, "that you have that gold, Richard, that you shot a colonel in your escape to save your own skin." "That's a damnable lie, sir!" exclaimed Sharp, scraping back his chair. "I have no gold, I murdered no colonel, unless he was killed in part of the raid." "The awkward thing, Richard, is that the French have an eyewitness to this killing. Now we are at peace, they want answers." "Aye? There has been reports that you have it." "I have the gold?" stormed Sharp, springing to his feet. "I don't know of any gold. Look around you, Major. When we were off, carrying out Wellington's orders, our camp was attacked." "Indeed. There is no French gold here, or anywhere." "That is damnably awkward, Richard, because it is the personal treasure of Bonaparte himself. The Republic claim it on behalf of France and they believe you have it. There will be a trial, Richard, and I do not believe it will come out very well in your favor." "And the murder?" "A colonel by the name of Colonel." But Munro needn't have said it. Tom Wright had already told him. Henri Mailliot. And he hadn't listened. 88,888,888. "It would seem we did her a disservice, then," concluded William Fredrickson, when Sharp told him of Munro's visit. "She told you faithfully. And so now, I have it from two sources that I am a coward, thief and murderer." "But you are not," replied Fredrickson, evenly. "I shall represent you, legally, should you wish it." "Get her out of here, William," sighed Sharp, looking at his boots. "A Polly Perks is nothing but trouble. Put her on a boat back to England, or better yet, South Carolina. Damn it, Richard, she saved them after all, and took on those devils, and at the fort too. Saved some of the lives of the men who tried to hang her. She is your only witness to the murder of Mailliot, she may well have saved your life too." "Aye." Sharp got to his feet. "Remind me, William, you told me she promised she would never put on a rifle's uniform, and there she was, with us at the fort. But," he mused, dashing his fist to the ground, "she was never wearing rifle's uniform, she went after the men who attacked them here. She must have been telling the truth." "You still doubted that? Those men that raided, who you believed to be her to be in league with. Those men have implicated me in something, Ducos has implicated me in something. She is your only witness against the murder of this Mailliot, which is now in the reckoning, because we were officially at peace when he was killed. What say you now, Richard?" What else must she do to prove she is not John Haycock? She must go. Sharp shook his head. Another company, you mean? No, rumors fly faster than the wind in the army. Her parentage would be known before she had even got there. What? Asked Sharp, as he saw Frederickson's face. She is a woman and they attempted bloody murder. Tomorrow. We will sort this tomorrow. 88,888,888. No one is allowed to go in or out, Captain Frederickson. The PMs were not around Sharp's tent any longer. Ramona had taken her through there, staggering and feeble, and had stayed with Matthew Harris that night. And the next morning, Harris had both escorted her to the river, and then back to the Major's tent, to food brought for her by Mrs. Harper. Clean and fed. Needs all satisfied. Almost. She had asked Harris to leave, and he had done, reluctantly. He took the place of PM Taylor, standing guard. As the day wore on, Tom almost called him back in, for her thoughts were very black indeed. They had hanged her, her regiment had, on the suspicion she was a spy, on the suspicion she was a traitor, on the true fact that she was her father's daughter. Daylight had gone, and so had Harris. His boots had been replaced by those of Ispley. Tom closed her eyes again. What was she to do now? She wasn't wanted here, and yet, she was not allowed to go. Night was well set, and when she heard PM Ispley say, "No one is allowed to go in or out, Captain Frederickson." But, the canvas moved aside in any case, and the PM called, "Miss Haycock, Captain Frederickson of the 62nd wishes to discuss with you a matter of—" "Thank you," Frederickson interrupted, but, instead of entering, "Miss Haycock, I trust I do not disturb you in prayer, or in sleep." "No, sir," Tom replied, bristling at her name, and she got to her feet. "Do come in. How are you? How is your neck?" She looked his impassive features, delivering the facts, doing the right thing as a commander, concerned for the well-being of a member of his regiment. "I will live, thanks to you," Tom replied, feeling conscious that the pain she had felt was on display. She reached for the injury. "And I will live thanks to you," he added. When Tom said nothing, he added, "Major Sharp saw you." "I spoke to him," replied Tom, standing up. "And he believes me to be a spy, sir. He told the men." "Wouldn't you, in his shoes?" Tom said nothing. Maybe she would have. Maybe she would have jumped further to conclusions than he had. Maybe, if Sharp had thought like her, she would now be dead. "I knew your father," Frederickson continued, "before he changed his loyalties. Brave, loyal, fighting for his beliefs. Beliefs which caused me to look like I do now. 30,000 tons of white-hot, burning metal descending onto our heads. Most who went in with us were never found. The pieces were just too small." Tom looked up. The stories the men told the night before, in grief, in despair, which they were to take out on her, Frederickson's words tonight, given to her as a kind of confession. If she could be rid of the name Haycock, the part of her that was her father, if that part of her could have hanged last night, she would have let it. When he left, Tom told Frederickson, still looking down, "I was very young, I could barely remember, but I remember us leaving our house and my mother crying, making me promise never to be a girl." She looked up, looked at her captain, her own confession spilling from her lips. "So I became a boy instead, and when I was old enough to understand I knew I must fight for my country." "And you came to the army and had the audacity to fight?" demanded the captain, fiercely. "You think yourself better than you are?" Tom said nothing, but turned away, feeling the bite of his words. Of course he felt embarrassed. What commander wouldn't? For the first time since she took the shilling she felt shame for joining. "You have skill," Frederickson continued, his face growing redder as he shouted. "You fought alone at the chateau. You forced General Calvert to surrender. But your presence is an abhorrence to order and discipline, you must see that. He waited for Tom to turn back round, to look at him. When she did not, he added, especially now they know you are a female. Soldiers can only endure so much, they may risk their lives for you, attack you, segregate you, desire you. Only if they know I am a girl, thought Tom, feeling wretched, forcing herself to look at the man she felt so much respect for who, it was clear, loathed her. Napoleon has fled, the French are our allies now. And an accusation of murder and treachery has been leveled at Major Sharp. I have come to ask, on his behalf, if you would, for the time being, stay with us, for your safety, in return help you can give us. It would atone a great deal for your lie. Tom felt herself sigh. So the truth had come out, and Ducos's lie that Major Sharp was behind Malliot's murder had emerged. I plan to go to America, sir. I would be able to be myself far better. She must keep her resolve. If her presence was abhorrent, she must take care to armor her feelings against sentiment. However, the Major had indeed treated her well, considering the circumstances. She watched as Fredrickson shifted between feet, clearly asking a favor of her was difficult, and the surge of emotion that she felt for the captain must be compressed to nothing. I am asking if you will stay, child, just for a few short weeks. I owe you my life. He may well owe you his. He would ask you this himself, but he is now under close guard for the murder of Colonel Malliot, and may only speak to me. Major Monroe is acting commander now. That's terrible, she managed. He has to have his name named to clear and he needs evidence. I am asking you, will you stay till his trial and bear witness? You wish me to tell them I am Roberta Haycock? Demanded Tom. That name is cursed to me. We will vouchsafe that you are Tom Wright, Fredrickson replied, stiffly. Just tell them what you know. He fell silent, and Tom realized he was inspecting her neck. I am ashamed they are my men, that they did this to you, he said, his voice low. They are to be punished. No, sir. Not on my account. Yes, Miss Haycock. They attempted to murder a British citizen. I have to be tough, it is most unfortunate. Now, he continued, looking at her intently, who was it who pushed you, child? I cannot say, for I could not tell, lied Tom. It was dark, there was much confusion. I could not discern much. In that case, a collective action means a collective punishment. I trust you are being looked after? Ramona, listed Tom, Giles Lauger, Emma Goff. They've all come to see me. Well, I do need an answer. Fredrickson cutting her off and taking a step towards the exit. In the case of Major Sharp, I will come by too. Please, sir, said Tom, looking at her former commander. I am so very sorry, about leaving, about enlisting, about my father. She looked at his face, then wished she hadn't. Fredrickson turned away, a proud man so disfigured, his features twisting because of her. I am sorry about lying to remain in the army, to be under your command. Please, please believe me, sir. Because William Fredrickson thinking well of her was something that she now realized she prized very highly indeed. You cannot remain in the British Army, you know that. I will go, I will leave. Now. Tonight. You simply have to say I was killed in action. If I cannot stay in the army, then Major Sharp has no jurisdiction over me. I ask you for the sake of honor to delay on his behalf, replied Fredrickson. That Major Ducos has murdered one of our allies for his own gain and implicated the Major in the process is abhorrent. Sharp shall hang for no crime. Like I nearly did, Tom said, putting her hand to her painful neck and shoulder. Her face was bruised where she had been hanged. Then, unexpectedly, the captain stepped forward, looking into her eyes as he put his hand to her face. The warmth of his fingers flushed her cheek. Tom was glad it was dark enough that the captain could not see her properly. She shivered. "Yes, it must hurt, Leopold," he said, interpreting her shudder as pain, and withdrew his hand. "I regret I could not have trained my men better. They must be severely punished, Roberta," he reiterated. "But sir—" "No. I insist. They must. They must see their actions are wholly wrong. You understand the army, yes? Discipline is all." Tom nodded. She understood. Weak leadership resulted in chaos. They would be punished, those who had been there, not to deter them, but to deter others. "It will be your choice, as to what the punishment should be, Miss Haycock, for it was you who was wronged." Tom nodded, feeling herself shake. He was angry with her, Tom knew, and his only motivation was to keep her there because of Major Sharp. "I will stay and I will give evidence for Major Sharp," Tom confirmed, and, as the words that the captain wanted to hear were spoken, Fredrickson smiled his crooked smile, the first he had given her since she had outshot Cooper, his face twisting upwards to compensate for his lack of jawbone. "Good. Good girl. But once it is over, I will be free to find another division." "As Thomas Wright?" "Indeed. In the former colonies I will be able to live as I wish. I cannot stay, Captain Fredrickson. The army is what I know. I fight for a living." "Very good, then," nodded the captain, his face returning to that of disdain. Tom made to salute, but the captain turned, pushed aside the canvas, and was gone. Tom sat down on the bedroll and buried her head in his lap, hating that the encounter was causing her to cry. She bit her lip so she would not make any sound. When she had finished sobbing and her mind was fully back under her control, the first thoughts that Tom thought were about leaving. How and when? "For I cannot stay, Captain Fredrickson," she thought to herself, as his face filled her mind. "Because of you I cannot stay." 88,888,888. News spread that Sharp and Fredrickson had gone shortly before Wellington, with Major Monroe had arrived to administer the camp. They were now not needed for war, but were to remain there until Sharp's trial was over. Far from idleness, however, Sergeants Harper and Rossler were instructing the men to clean, tidy, wash, fetch and cook, and altogether look like what they weren't. News, too, had filtered around that Sharp's wife has left him and cleared out all his money. Tom felt sorry for him, for that, for he was a decent officer, and did not deserve that, as well as a trial. The men, led by Newton and Schmidt, had come the very morning of Sharp and Fredrickson's departure, demanding of her an audience. There had already been a scuffle between them and the 95th, who had been taking it in turns to guard Tom, but she had come out, and heard what they had to say. It had cleared the air, between them all. But what was equally clear was that she was no longer their comrade Tom Wright. So, to pass the time, she reappeared, rejoined the women and assisted with the camp chores, minded the children, cooked, fetched, cleaned. Tom had even overheard, to her amusement, a middle-aged major ask Harris about her, to which she was surprised to hear Harris refer to her as his sister. "Well, in that case, I would like to have your sister to dinner, Major Hogan," and he raised his hat to Tom, when she looked in their direction. Tom could not continue to reside in Major Sharp's tent. A section had been added next to the Harper's tent, and Tom gladly called this home. She had even been approached by Anders Schmidt, who thanked her for her work on the night of the attack. "You did more than anyone could do under the circumstances. You did what you could for Anna and baby Thomas. Did you know we named him after you? We have always been impressed with your skill, even more so that you are a girl." "I am nothing but the child of a soldier, doing my duty," Tom answered, modestly. And then, she told Schmidt of the punishment they were to receive, and that he should bring every last one of those involved to her. For fining them, and killing them would bring hardship on their families, Tom reasoned. So, her punishment would be an apology. in front of them all, their families, the 95th, one by one. At first, Tom believed that none would do this, for it would, in effect, be an admission of guilt. But, having heard Schmidt's humble words, each and every man of the 60th, even those not there that night, spoke in turn words of regret to her, and she in turn thanked them, telling her former company that she was pleased to see an end to the matter. Then, a week after Hogan had arrived, Harris hustled Tom to one side to tell her the news that Sharp had gone to Maillet's sister, looking for answers about the French gold. "When he returns, you will give evidence, as you promised." "Of course, yes," nodded Tom. "They are coming back soon? With the gold?" "No. He's not got the gold. But he knows where it is." "What?" Harris asked, when he saw Tom's face light up. Then he realized why she was smiling. "They're coming home," Tom repeated, with joy. "The Major, and Captain Frederickson. I will see the captain again." Her meaning was not lost on Matt, who immediately grinned back. The captain?" Tom said nothing, but her face brightened. She knew he hated her for what she had done, but the thought of seeing the captain again had caused the fluttering in the lower part of her stomach to become more intense. Her presence was no more than a conduit to secure Sharp's innocence. She was no longer a rifleman, she was a disgrace in his eyes. And that made her. "He is dear to me," she concluded, laconically. "He is the best commander I have ever had," she clarified. But, on hearing Tom's words, Harris's face fell. "Oh, Tom," he continued, mournfully, touching her shoulder. And he told her how Frederickson had accompanied Sharp to the home of Henri Maillet in order to secure testimony of his sister, and that for this the captain had bravely given his life. "Captain Frederickson is dead," Harris confirmed. It took some time for the understanding of what Matt was saying to her. When she did, she felt her knees crumple. Matt caught her, and held her. Then, "So am I," thought Tom, as she cried the tears which would not stop for days, soaking through Harris's green jacket. "So am I."